Hey there, I'm Kat from Magoosh, and I'm thrilled today to be speaking with Dr. Stephen Bradley. So you're going to hear from him directly in just a second, but I do want to introduce him and mention some of the amazing things that he's involved with and where he's coming from. So Dr. Bradley earned his medical degree at Howard University and was a resident at University of Chicago. So he is currently an anesthesiologist. He continues to be a naval officer. He's a mentor, educator, ethics consultant, and he's the host of the Black Doctors podcast. He's also an advocate just across the board for aspiring minority professionals and physicians particularly. He's a strong supporter, as we are at Magoosh, of increasing diversity among health providers and reducing disparities in healthcare in general. So, hi, Dr. Bradley. How are you doing today?
Hi, I'm great. Thanks so much for having me on.
Oh, of course. To start out, so I've got some questions here, and this is going to be pretty informal. I just have some questions prepared, but we can take the conversation whatever direction it develops. Can you tell me a little bit about your path to where you are now? So you have an exciting, multifaceted career. How did you get where you are?
Yeah, that's a long answer. I'll try and give you the shorter version. So right now I'm an anesthesiologist. I've been in practice for 3 years. So I came out of residency in 2018. My path to medicine was circuitous. I definitely took some little trails along the way, made some mistakes along the way as well, but everything ended up working out. I am a Navy brat. My dad was an active duty naval officer. My little brother's done active duty as well. That's why I always wanted to join the service. I moved around a bunch growing up, and somewhere between my first and second year of college, I was kind of exposed to, as mostly a roommate and a good friend of mine who transitioned from a music major. I was a music major as well. He transitioned from that to biology with the goal of becoming a physician.
Mm-hmm.
Talking to him kind of helped me realize that this was an attainable goal potentially for me. And so I changed my major going into my sophomore year of college. Doing so, I took all those extremely hard science courses. I didn't have a very strong background in the sciences. So it was definitely a leap of faith just to see what I could accomplish coming out of college. Since I did finish the degree in 3 years, I figured out my senior year of college that I should figure out an extra year since I would be able to apply for the following year to matriculate into medical school. So I was able to graduate from college, took 6 weeks where I moved home and studied for the MCAT, and then started a 1-year master's program down in Florida, and then applied to medical school during that master's program. I ended up attending Howard University College of Medicine, which is a fantastic choice. It's a historically Black university located in Washington, D.C. And from that point, I was able to apply and match into anesthesiology residency at the University of Chicago.
Yeah, that's incredible. It's quite a turnaround going from the fine arts to BS degree. How did you sustain motivation during those initial years when you were making that big change in what you were studying and how you were thinking of yourself as a college student and professional? Was it hard?
Yeah, it was difficult. I think the motivation for me came from kind of within as I approached this insurmountable obstacle in my mind. I had no idea if I could do it or not, but as I worked hard and I saw some results from my work, I'd get A minus, B plus. That's kind of my range as a student. And my hard work would pay off. I had a good network. It wasn't quite the support network most people think about. I studied with the really smart kids. And I was also working part-time through college. But I studied with some really smart kids who would ace every exam. And then I would be kind of right behind them. So I felt like I wasn't doing as well.
Right.
And then about halfway through school, one of my other classmates was like, "Oh, you're actually like doing really well." It's because of who I studied with. They pushed me to do better as well.
Yeah, it's support networks are one of the most vital components, I think, to getting through the long haul in something like this. So tell me more about your work right now. Tell me about your podcast.
Yeah, so the podcast is something I started back in 2020. So in June, I looked around on social media. A lot of the portrayals of healthcare and medical school, at least they weren't what I experienced anyways. And I wanted to provide a more realistic view, or at least my perspective. Now with social media, it takes a lot of time and effort. So I figured a podcast would be a good way to provide some lasting content that people could go back and refer to, a database of sorts. And there's other podcasts out there, but I know so many incredible people that I had the privilege of bumping into during my training that I thought these stories should be shared. So I wanted to create a platform to share those stories. And so we started back in June of 2020, in the middle of the COVID-19 pandemic. And it really took off, and it's been pretty successful. We're in our third season now, probably almost 30 episodes. And I also did a kind of a spinoff I called it Ethically Sourced, because I do have a passion for medical ethics. So just like, when I chose to go into medicine, with podcasting, I taught myself kind of how it all worked. It's not that hard. We have the internet, really. But it's been a nice little challenge to produce and edit and do the marketing. And so far it's going pretty well and getting some pretty good feedback.
Yeah, I mean, it seems I hadn't realized that you started as recently as you had, because it seems like it's really taken off. Yeah, that's great. So in your experience, either your personal experience or in your experience talking to people through your podcast or mentoring, what are some of the biggest struggles that you see aspiring doctors face, and especially those coming from minority backgrounds or underrepresented backgrounds?
Yeah, for physicians of color or Black aspiring physicians, and talking to my friends, because the Black Doctors podcast, we feature all guests who identify as Black or African American. And the biggest thing that I've noticed, having talked to 20 to 25 folks, is a lack of representation and a lack of exposure to the field. So talking to my guests, I hear about them seeing Bill Cosby on TV as the first Black physician they've seen, or Ben Carson in his legacy. Today, I was actually interviewing someone who said they didn't meet their first Black physician until they were 24, and they were actually in medical school.
Wow.
So lack of representation is a big deal, because if you don't see it, it's really hard to step out and pursue a career field that you know nothing about. That was also my experience, and I grew up in a fairly middle-class family. And it just goes to show that we all have different struggles, no matter what or where we are on the socioeconomic scale. So even with a middle-class family, I was not exposed to Black physicians. And I met my first one in medical school as well.
Yeah, that's incredible. And it seems like with social media, so multifaceted now, I think that there's that many more opportunities for people to see the representation.
Yeah, I think it's definitely helped. I think the second thing, which kind of leads to your company, Magoosh, is standardized exams. That's a big deal for a variety of reasons, but that was one of my big struggles, when I continued to study and see minimal results. And it seemed like other people have a cheat code or I never really mastered standardized exams. I'm a much better hands-on person. Eventually, towards the end of my career, I was able to do well on the step exams and my board exams, thankfully. But that's the second kind of common thing that I hear.
That's right. Yes. Our company is really striving to bridge that gap, and really speak to students who are motivated by, the sort of by the ability to develop the confidence in themselves and to know that the resources are out there. Maybe they're not as plentiful as we'd all hope, but that there are things to take advantage of, and other people in the same situation. And and so one of our core mission statements is to be accessible, is the very first thing in what we strive to be. So since you kind of started hitting on the MCAT, I do have a couple questions about that for you. And it's no content at all, but in terms of just mindset and approach and strategies, so what mindset should students embrace before diving into MCAT prep?
Yeah, that is different for everybody. That's an obvious answer to the question. But for me, I can multitask, but for big things in my life, I like to set aside a certain amount of time. I can only study when I'm fully ready to study. So the best decision that I made was moving home. Again, I had the luxury and the support system to move home as a college graduate. And I stayed in the house for 6 weeks straight. My mom would cook for the rest of the family, and I would eat. And I honestly did nothing for the 6 weeks I studied. I changed the oil in my car. It was the only like non-MCAT thing that I did. Yeah. And every Friday I would take a full-length practice exam. And this was me winging it. This is back in the days of LimeWire. You can edit this if you need to, but I downloaded test prep companies MP3s on LimeWire. And I listened to those on my what do you call it? Gosh, what the old Apple?
Oh, the what was those? What those things called? Yeah, I know, the handheld.
Yeah. Oh my God.
Something.
Yeah. Well, we have iPhones now, but whatever we had back then. So I listened to that on repeat, and then I used iPod. Oh my God. I'm getting old. So I listened to it again and again on my iPod, and then I did. I bought an MCAT prep book, and then I bought some exams from the company itself, and I made my own kind of study plan. I had some friends that had some advisors that they were able to help, and then there's a couple of kind of Excel spreadsheets that floated around about this is how you make an MCAT study plan. So that's what I use, and I pieced it together. And I, again, had the luxury of 6 weeks to focus on that. And I see other people, though, that's not your situation, or you're in college and studying for the MCAT. And that speaks to their time management skills, where you have to carve that amount of time aside to put in the work. So it's definitely a mindset, and that's going to benefit you because it just gets harder, to be honest. Like the MCAT was one of the rougher experiences in my pathway to medicine. Right. But the other experiences, although not as intense and final, you're going to be using those faculties, and you're going to be studying that hard the rest of your career.
Right. Yeah. And that's really important to keep in mind. Yeah. I encourage students to make that connection, that it's not just the test. It's really sort of a way of revving up for a lifetime of challenges and thinking on your feet. Yeah. And like you, so when I was doing my dissertation, I moved back home too for a couple of months. Yeah. But when I was doing my master's thesis, I was teaching, I was a research assistant, and I was going to school. And the only time I had was the hours between like 4:30 a.m. and 6 a.m. And so I just had to do it all right then. And so, I mean, I've done both approaches, and I can say that it's really just about getting into it. It's about whatever fits your lifestyle. You just have to kind of take the time to realize this is my new reality for a while, and it's not going to last forever.
Absolutely. I know coming out of undergrad, so that's when I was working part-time. So I would get off from class at 4. I worked at a drugstore as an assistant manager, and I'd go. They were able to kind of squeeze me in, and like 4 nights of the week, I would close the store. So from 4 p.m. to 10 p.m. Then I get back to the dorm, and then I drink an energy drink, and then I probably study from 11 o'clock to 2 or 3 in the morning, and then sleep. I'm kind of a night owl, so that worked out for me. So there are times where you have to change up, like you mentioned. It's going to change, and you're going to have to use those time management skills that you'll use later on in your life as well.
Yep. And be willing to experiment, because the first thing you try might not work.
Yeah, absolutely.
So one of the questions I get really frequently from students is how to bridge the gap from what they know. They've maybe done really well in their classes. They can look at a textbook and answer the questions at the end of the chapter. But then when it comes to actually applying it on the MCAT with the passages and with the sort of multidisciplinary approach, they struggle to see their scores go up. Have you, in either personally or through people that you've talked to, do you have any insight on that or tips?
Yeah, we're reflecting back to the MCAT, which was again a long time ago. The best thing I did was take those full-length practice exams.
Mm-hmm.
So I was mentally fatigued by the time I hit those passages. And they would give a score report that was pretty comprehensive as well. And there were times, for a while, I didn't see my score go up at all. And then eventually it started to creep up here and there.
Right.
For me, the application part was a bit of a struggle, but after you study the material and read, you need to do. For me, that's what helped, is actually doing that task and doing this calculation, to doing them under pressure, since that's how it will be on the real exam.
Yeah, thanks for that. So let's see. Let's talk a little bit more about resources and support. So what are some ways that students who are in either the pre-medical school stage or in medical school at the moment, what are some of the resources they can take advantage of to, you specifically went to a Black medical school, and that's what your podcast is on. So maybe speaking specifically about Black pre-meds, and then maybe anything else that you've come across in your time.
Yeah, so my mom would always say, I may not have the answer, but I know where I can find the answer. And I think sometimes with the life, it's more of a puzzle than we think it is. So I was broke coming out of college, or in college, and I needed books to study. I took the GRE to get into to my master's program. Well, there's a little place that we don't really go to anymore because we have the internet, but it's called the library. And the library had books back then. The guide for all the American medical colleges. I want to say it was a book called MCAT, where it had all the medical schools listed and their entrance requirements. Like, that wasn't really available online back in 2009 when I was applying. So I went to the library, and they'd have the 2008 edition or 2007 edition. I can get that information for medical schools. I got Kaplan's GRE prep book. Those are all, I could check them out for 2 weeks at a time and study those. Sometimes they'd come out with discs or CDs that we don't even use CD-ROMs anymore, but we could check those out and from the library. Medical schools typically have libraries as well. These days we have a lot of stuff on PDFs that can get shared, or just online resources that you can go to. Pretty much everything you can think of is online. And I know the test prep market has really blown up in the last 5 or 10 years with study materials for every kind of style of learner.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, and people forget about the library. We still have them, and fortunately, a lot of them have really ramped up their electronic offerings.
Yeah.
So let's wrap up. Well, actually, no, one more question on that topic, which is about mentorship and maybe peer group support. How do you recommend students find mentors or find study buddies if they maybe are the only person in their circle who's going down this path?
No, that's a really good question, especially for me, because I'm not a big mentorship person. Like, I can help mentor people, but I don't have too many mentors.
Yeah.
I kind of get weirded out by longitudinal relationships because so many times mentorship is, I don't have anything to say or talk about or ask you right now. And it's this kind of weird, awkward silence, whether that's by text or email. But what I am good at is, if I if I need to know the answer or I have a question, I will reach out to whoever I think can answer that, and I will ask my question.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess you could say that's my mentorship, but it's kind of in short bursts.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I have worked to be able to mentor other people, and I do have a couple mentors that I work with, some more longitudinal, some in shorter episodes where I just answer specific questions. So
Mm-hmm.
for folks that are coming through the pipeline, think about, how do you learn? Are you somebody that needs mentorship or constant kind of presence or force to help you along? And
Mm-hmm.
regardless of who you are, the internet and social media has made it so easy to have questions answered. It may not make it easier it does make it easier to find mentorship, but remember that not everybody is a mentor. Not everybody's as good at mentoring as we would like
Mm-hmm.
they would all be.
Right.
But the benefit is you can ask everybody a question. And if you ask questions the right way, you don't burn bridges, you're not annoying, you're not offensive. So I would recommend to every student, if you see somebody on social media that's in the field that you want to be in,
Mm-hmm.
politely send them a message. And it really helps to have a specific question, because I do get quite a few messages online and emails that, I want to be an
Mm-hmm.
anesthesiologist. How do I do this? And the person's in high school. And it's like, well,
Mm-hmm.
okay, that's a very broad question and one that I really can't help you
Yeah.
with. But if you ask, what can I do in high school to get into medical school? Then that's something a little more actionable that I can break down and discuss. And that's true
Mm-hmm.
for most people. They'll be able to answer those shorter questions. Don't ask the open-ended questions, ask a specific question, and you're more likely to get a response. And as you develop
Mm-hmm.
relationships, you're going to find some people that are there for long-term mentoring, and they can help you along. There's also, podcasts like my own and many others. There's a lot of
Mm-hmm.
blog posts out there, Facebook groups. YouTube is a wealth of resources, obviously. So fortunately, it's everywhere. You just have to look.
Yeah. Yeah. Those are great tips. I'm sure they'll be really valuable to our followers. So I guess I'll end with this question. It's a question I like to end with in general. It's fun to kind of see, pool the wisdom, so to speak. So thinking back, what was the best piece of advice you received when you were at the pre-med stages of your career, or maybe just starting medicine? And yeah, just with the attitude of passing that on, it might help some of our students.
There's two phrases that I would use. So
Mm-hmm.
one was Finding Nemo, just keep swimming.
That's good.
You just got to keep going. The other, this was more in medical school when we had some really tough rotations.
Mm.
It's from a song, Jesus Take the Wheel. It sometimes stuff's out of your control. So when
Mm-hmm.
we're having a really bad day on our surgery rotation, we just be like, oh, Jesus Take the Wheel.
Yeah.
It's above me now. It's another way. And you just got to roll with the punches. Sometimes
Yeah.
you got to roll with the punches, but you just keep swimming and keep your head down, and it's going to work out okay.
That's great. So that's all the questions that I have. Is there anything else that you'd like to add, or questions for me?
Let's see. From pre-med, I think that was pretty comprehensive. I think we covered a lot of the hot spots, the things that I want to tell mentors and mentees.
That's great. Well, thanks again for taking this time to talk with me, and I wish you all the best in your myriad of work responsibilities and developments. So have a great week, and I hope we get the chance to talk again sometime in the future.